At the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium in the spring of 1968, 1,200 seats faced a central stage reserved for demonstration. The stage was bare, except for a single microphone stand, a wooden chair, and a folding table, where the tournament director and 3 judges sat with scoring cards. Outside, the Los Angeles evening moved toward dusk. Inside the auditorium, the climate was sealed and still. The air held the particular silence of a gathering that knows it will witness something decisive, even if the audience did not yet understand what. The man walking through the backstage curtain that afternoon was 70 years old. His name was Masters Williamson, though few in the audience knew it. He had spent 42 years teaching karate across the American Southwest, accumulating students, a reputation, and a collection of newspaper clippings that spoke of his record and his presence. At 5 feet 11 inches and 196 pounds, he carried the physical authority of someone who had once been formidable and had taken particular care not to surrender it entirely. His gi, white, pressed, bearing the emblem of his lineage, hung on him with the confidence of worn ritual. He moved to center stage with the measured pace of a man accustomed to being watched, accustomed to attention resting on him like a weight he had learned to bear without complaint. The young challenger who followed was not on that stage yet. He was backstage, preparing. The preparation took 3 minutes. In those 3 minutes, the crowd's volume climbed incrementally. 2,000 eyes turned toward the curtain. The specific vibration of anticipation, the sound of a crowd that suspects it has been sold something extraordinary but has not yet decided whether to believe it, moved through the auditorium like heat. Bruce Lee stepped through the curtain wearing a black silk shirt that caught the stage lights. He was 32 years old, 5 foot 7 inches tall, 135 pounds. He had spent 17 years in the United States building a fighting reputation through films, television appearances, and demonstrations in rooms very much like this one. The audience did not yet know who he was. 70% of the 1,200 people in that room knew the name of the older man. 20% knew both names. 10% understood the geometry of what was about to happen. Masters Williamson stood on that stage, looking out at the crowd, and then he did something that would give the evening its texture. He picked up the microphone. In 42 years of teaching, he had earned the specific confidence that age and repetition bestow. He had never been humbled in his own dojo. He had never been corrected in front of his students. He had cultivated a kind of authority that does not bend. The microphone, when he raised it, felt like an extension of that authority. "I have demonstrated martial arts on this stage for 4 decades, he said, his voice filling the auditorium without strain. "I have trained 3,000 students. I have never been challenged in the way I am about to be challenged today." This young man, he gestured to Bruce Lee with a motion that carried the weight of dismissal, has built a career on myth and motion pictures. "I am here to show you the difference between a man who understands the classical forms and a man who has learned to move on film. When this demonstration ends, you will understand that age and discipline do not vanish simply because someone is quicker. You will understand that I have already won this encounter simply by accepting it." He placed the microphone back on the stand with the deliberation of someone placing the final piece of an argument he considered settled. The specific silence that followed was not the silence of agreement. It was the silence of an audience recognizing that they had been positioned to watch not a demonstration, but a correction. The crowd shifted. Row by row, as if a current were moving across water, the faces turned toward Bruce Lee. The recognition was not of his identity. It was of something in his stillness that contradicted the older man's certainty. If you want to understand how this moment unfolded, make sure you are subscribed. What happens next will show you how a man half someone's age, carrying none of the authority that age typically grants, responds to public humiliation. Comment below where you are watching from. Bruce Lee stood in the center of the stage. He did not move. He did not call out. He did not raise the microphone to offer his own preparation. Instead, he waited for 6 seconds. 6 seconds in which the auditorium's temperature seemed to shift and the crowd's anticipation changed its character entirely. Then, he walked to the folding chair positioned stage right. He removed his black silk shirt. He folded it once, deliberately, and placed it on the chair seat. He stood bare-chested in the stage lights, 5 foot 7 inches and 135 pounds, facing a man 70 years old and 196 pounds who had just told 1,200 people that the outcome was determined. The audience did not applaud. The absence of sound when the garment was folded was itself a message. Williamson's shoulders tightened. He had expected anger. He had expected words. He had expected anything except the specific composure that now stood before him. They stood 22 feet apart. The tournament director raised his hand. Begin. What followed consumed 47 seconds in story time and would consume the next 5 minutes of narration in extreme dilation. 47 seconds in front of 1,200 witnesses is a different kind of 47-second. 47 seconds with 2 men who have trained their entire lives to compress intention into motion is a unit of time that does not pass like ordinary time. Second one. Masters Williamson moved first, a choice that revealed the specific pride that had brought him to the microphone. He threw what martial artists call a haymaker punch, a wide circular strike that gathers force from the hip and shoulders. It was executed with technical competence. The punch was also telegraphed. A man watching from the third row of the audience, a tournament director named Keyes, noticed that Williamson's elbow bent before his hip committed. Keyes's hands moved to the table. He set down his scoring card with the deliberation of a man witnessing the beginning of a sequence that would determine everything. Second 2. Bruce Lee did not block the punch. He did not parry it. He slipped it, his upper body moving laterally 6 inches, allowing the force of Williamson's commitment to pass through empty space. The older man's weight had already transferred forward. His balance, committed to the arc of the punch, now had nothing to stop it. For a fraction of a second, he was vulnerable in a way his experience told him he should not be. What he was witnessing was a lesson. A fight is not 2 men hitting each other. A fight is a negotiation about distance and timing and the precise moment when one man's confidence exceeds the geometry available to his body. Masters Williamson did not understand this yet. Understanding requires first the experience of being wrong. Second 3. As Williamson's momentum carried him past his target, Bruce Lee pressed forward, a single step that closed distance and repositioned him behind the older man's initial line. From this angle, behind and slightly to the right, Williamson's next response would be compromised. His next punch, if thrown, would have to chamber from an awkward quarter. A trained observer could see the problem before Williamson could solve it. A stunt coordinator named James Chen sat in the 5th row. He had been hired to evaluate the safety of the demonstration. He understood what was happening in real time, not as violence, but as information. The specific efficiency of every movement Bruce Lee made was invisible to most of the audience. To Chen, each motion was a sentence in a language that said, "I can be here. I can move you where I choose. I can make the rest of this as quick or as long as you require." Second 4 through 7. Williamson threw a back fist strike, a horizontal circular motion of the arm and hand executed from a chambered position near the face. The technique was classical. The technique was also committed. Bruce Lee blocked with his left forearm, accepting the force of the strike on muscle rather than bone, and in the same motion sent his right hand toward Williamson's face in a straight line. The speed was not superhuman. The speed was sufficient. The punch stopped 1 inch from Williamson's left cheekbone. The tournament director, Keyes, stood up from the table. His scorecard fell to the floor. He did not retrieve it. The crowd had not yet understood what they were watching. The moment existed in the space between the first indication that something had shifted and the full realization of the shift's consequence. Second 8 through 12. Masters Williamson staggered back. His breathing had accelerated. The specific confidence that had carried him to the microphone was in the process of being dismantled piece by piece. He attempted a spinning kick, a technique requiring both commitment and balance. Bruce Lee remained in motion. He did not attempt to block the kick. Instead, he simply moved backward and slightly to his right and allowed Williamson's leg to pass through the space where he had stood. The older man's weight was now entirely on one leg, the other extended in a technique whose follow-up required him to chamber it again before throwing another strike. Time had become the choreography. Bruce Lee had understood this before he walked on the stage. Masters Williamson was learning it as it happened. Second 13. From the repositioned distance, Bruce Lee stepped forward and completed another straight punch, faster than the first, but like the first, pulled 3 inches short of Williamson's sternum. The message was beyond argument now. It said, "I can touch you anywhere I choose. Your age provides no protection. Your reputation does not create distance. Your certainty has become a liability." Williamson's third attempted combination, a left-handed hook followed by a sidekick, met the same response. Each technique was slipped or sidestepped. Each follow-up punch or kick was perfectly controlled, executed at a distance that demonstrated absolute authority over space and timing, and withdrawn before impact. By second 23, the audience had fallen into a particular silence, the silence of people watching not a fight but a judgment. The fight was already over. The older man was still moving, still attempting techniques, but the outcome had been written in the moment when Bruce Lee folded his shirt and said nothing. The private sentence came in second 34. After slipping another combination, Bruce Lee stepped close to Masters Williamson, close enough that his next words would be heard only by the man standing in front of him and the tournament director, who was now standing at the edge of the stage with his scoring cards forgotten. "You have already proven you are a teacher," Bruce Lee said quietly. "That much is clear. What I want you to understand is that teaching is not the same as fighting. Fighting is something else. Go back to your school. That is where your authority lives. Not here." Williamson stood there. His breathing was heavy. His white gi was beginning to darken with sweat. He had come to the stage expecting to demonstrate a correction. He had instead experienced one. The fork in the road was visible now. He could attempt to recover the narrative, throw more combinations, push through the reality of what was happening, try to land something. Or he could accept what had been shown to him. He lowered his hands. The audience understood this before the tournament director announced it. The confrontation lasted 47 seconds. The implications of those 47 seconds would spread through martial arts communities for decades. The specific story that spread afterward was not the story that happened. The specific story was that Bruce Lee had humiliated an old man. The specific story was that Williamson had been crushed, destroyed, annihilated by a younger fighter. What had actually happened was more precise and more durable. A man had been shown the difference between authority conferred by repetition and authority conferred by understanding. He had been shown this in front of 1,200 people. He had been shown this without being injured. He had been shown this by someone who had no desire to injure him. The ripple of that 47 seconds moved outward like a wave. In 1969, a documentary filmmaker named Robert Poehler interviewed both men separately. Williamson said he had not understood what happened. Lee said nothing. By 1974, the story had transformed into something else, a legend in which Lee had fought 7 men. By 1990, someone's memory had added that Williamson had challenged Lee to prove himself. None of these details were true, but truth had already left the narrative. What remained was the emotional truth, which was this. A young man had accepted the challenge of a much older man and had demonstrated such superior understanding that the older man had conceded. Williamson continued teaching for another 11 years. He kept the newspaper clipping from that day pinned in his office. He would show it to students who asked about the incident at Santa Monica. Over time, his framing of the event shifted. He began to say that he had gone to evaluate this film actor. He began to say that he had been impressed by Lee's ability to control distance. He began to rewrite the story to include himself as a scout, an evaluator, rather than a man who had been corrected in public. This is how oral history works. The original event is too specific, too precise, too attached to one man's pride. The legend that replaces it is more comfortable. It distributes the shame. It allows the loser to become a witness, someone who saw something important and lived to tell it. Bruce Lee never told the story. He filmed it 4 years later, a sequence in a motion picture in which his character faced a master martial artist in an arena and moved through an entire arsenal of techniques without being touched. The fiction, in other words, told the truth more efficiently than the fact could have done. Masters Williamson lived to be 92 years old. He taught 4,300 students in his lifetime. He received awards from the California Martial Arts Federation. When he died in 1998, his students remembered him as a dedicated teacher and a link to classical training. The Santa Monica demonstration was rarely mentioned. But it existed. It existed in the specific memory of the tournament director Keyes, who lived until 2001 and told the story to his son exactly as it happened. It existed in the specific memory of James Chen, who understood in real time what he was watching and who spent 47 years afterward teaching that a fight is not violence, it is communication. A fight is one man saying to another man, in the clearest language available, I understand something you have not yet understood. And sometimes, a fight is a mercy. Sometimes the man delivering the message chooses to do it without injuring the man receiving it. The moral of this confrontation is this: certainty is the enemy of growth. A man who believes he has nothing left to learn will be taught a lesson. A man who thinks his age has granted him wisdom instead of merely experience will discover that wisdom requires the humility to continue learning. Bruce Lee was not celebrated for defeating Masters Williamson. He was celebrated by those who understood for demonstrating how much can be communicated without destruction, how authority can be established without domination, how a man can close a book without burning it. Next week, we will examine the confrontation between Bruce Lee and a heavyweight boxer who walked into a demonstration believing that size alone could overcome skill. The specific sequence of events in that encounter lasted only 3 seconds in story time. The lesson it contained has lasted more than 50 years.